Please pray with me. God of grace and God of beauty, God who led the Magi and who leads us, awaken our spirits to what you would have us hear and see. Awaken our spirits to the gifts that we have to present to the Christ as well. And let us hear a word of hope, a word of challenge, a word of transformation in these ancient stories that become part of our own. Amen. The prophet Isaiah opens during a time when the people of Israel are returning from captivity of 70 years back to their homeland. And their homeland has been left in ruins. Jerusalem is devastated. The crops have been destroyed. And after 70 years, the people return to a desolate land, a land that some had never even seen. And they are to begin again. And in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 2, we hear this descriptive phrase, "For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the people." Have you ever felt like you've been covered in darkness? As if there is a heavy, wet wool blanket thrown over you and you're so exhausted you can't throw it off. You just feel a weight upon you and you don't know where to turn. That's what it was like for the people of Isaiah's time. All they saw was destruction. All they knew was their own exhaustion, and they felt rootless. They felt alone. They felt like they didn't have the energy to make a new beginning. Have you ever felt that way? I grew up in Cumberland, Rhode Island, just about a mile over the Attleboro border, but a world away. And in that location, my mom and dad, when they were starting their life out after my dad had been released from World War II, they built with their own hands together a house in Cumberland. And for the next 54 years, they called that place home. And there was a place with lots of good memories. They raised my brother and me. And then in 2000, my dad died. And my mom really struggled to find a new way for herself. And any of us who have lost a loved one knows what that is like. And then in 2008, this house that she and Norman had built together with their own hands was gutted by fire. My brother and I, we encouraged our mom to move where Tricia and I were, or where my brother and his wife were in Florida, to come and make a fresh start with us. But her memories were in this place. And she said that's why God invented insurance money. And so this feisty lady in her mid-80s rebuilt the house on the same foundation that she and Norman had laid down. It took several months. Finally, she moved from her temporary quarters and she moved into her new house. And she was there for a week. And then she fell. And she broke her pelvis. And she broke her shoulder. It so happened that I was about to begin my sabbatical at that time when my mom fell. So I changed all my plans, and I went to be by my mom. And the doctor said to my mom and to me, "Millie, you'll never leave this nursing home, and you may never walk again." Have you ever felt shrouded by darkness? Have you ever felt that everything you hold dear has been taken from you? That's what the people of Isaiah's time felt. That's what my mom was feeling. overcome by darkness. But Isaiah was saying to his people, he was calling them to see something that they couldn't see. And he offers this in verse 4 and 5. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together. They come to you, all the nations of the world. Your sons shall come from afar, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant, and your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. Can't you see it, says Isaiah. Can't you see what soon will be? Isaiah was speaking, being a channel for God's voice, was calling them to a new reality, to look beyond the darkness. So I'm sitting with my mom, and I would spend the next month hanging out with my mom every day at the nursing home. My mom is a tough cookie. Is that right, Tricia? She's a tough cookie. And she gave me that flinty look that I had seen many times before, after the doctor had left the room saying she'd probably never walk. And she said, quote, "I'm not out of the game yet. I'm going to walk, I'm going to sit on my new deck, and I'm going to have a cup of coffee." And for the next 2 months, my mom, along with the other people going through rehab, worked with a physical therapist, the occupational therapist. It brought out the very best of her. It brought out the very best. They became a community of encouragement to one another. And that time came, 2 months later, when she, at 85, walked out of that nursing home and sat on her deck and had her cup of coffee. And for the next 6 years, she would make her way and call that place home. That's the house that was rebuilt on the foundation, the plan that my dad created. He was the architect of this simple little ranch house. These are the trees that my brother and I climbed. We had forts in the top of the canopy. And this was the place in the deck to the right where Millie wanted to return, a place that she called home. Sometimes the darkness lifts. Sometimes a poet comes through a prophet such as Isaiah and calls the people to envision what can be, the promise that can be realized if you only have hope. The Magi were travelers. They were from the east. Scholars believe they were from present-day Iran, Persia. They were probably Zoroastrians, a religion that still lives in Iran. That's about 5 centuries older than Christianity. They were people who followed the stars. And a rumor had circulated throughout the region, throughout the Middle East, that a star would lead the people to a great gift. The prophet of the Jewish people, a different religion from the Magi, spoke of one arising from Bethlehem. And so the Magi, our story tells us, left their home in Persia and followed the star to Bethlehem. It's interesting that the Magi, the ones to realize who Jesus was as the Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one of God, were outsiders, outside of Jesus' own people. A reminder that this gift of the Christ comes for all of humanity, represented in these outsiders, these Zoroastrians, these Persians from a foreign land. The hope, the promise of Epiphany is that God's great gift has come for all. And the Magi followed, graced with a promise that they would receive a blessing. And the star showed them and us where the blessing was to be found. Have you ever been surprised, like the Magi, and realized that there's more going on? Have you ever been surprised by grace? That the world is bigger, that the darkness has lifted, and that there is hope to be found. The Magi were guided by this promise of hope, the Messiah, the anointed one of God. About 6 years ago, I was in Portland, Oregon, to hear the Dalai Lama speak. And I bought my ticket late, so I had a quote-unquote obstructed view, which was actually at the side of where the Dalai Lama was speaking. There's a crowd of about 20,000 people. And I was at the side, so I was actually only about 30 feet from the Dalai Lama. And I was looking right into the side view of the staging. And they had a big crowd speaking. They had guest speakers introducing the Dalai Lama. And all 20,000 of us were so looking forward to what this holy man had to say. But there was a little girl in the corner with her dad, who had been one of the speakers introducing the Dalai Lama. That's her dad with the sweater. And the little girl was struggling. She was about 5 years old or so, and she had been crying in the corner. Now, the 20,000 people couldn't see this, but I and people in the obstructed views had a view of the dad and the daughter at the far side of the stage with the Dalai Lama on the other side. The crowd erupts in applause. The Dalai Lama is introduced. But instead of walking up to the microphone to speak, he crosses the stage very slowly. He's an old man now. And he goes to the little girl who is being comforted, not too effectively, by her dad. Now, 20,000 people are on their feet applauding, and now they have stopped. And they're waiting while the Dalai Lama leans down and speaks to the little girl. Then he puts his ear close so she can whisper something. And now while 20,000 people are waiting, the Dalai Lama slowly walks to the other side of the stage and roots into this bag, this large bag that he has. He pulls out a few items. Now I'm about 20, 30 feet from him, so I'm getting a good view from my obstructed view, and puts items out, puts some back, and then chooses one item. I can't see what it is. Then walks back to the little girl and places this item in her hand. And this huge smile breaks out on this little girl's face. And she skips off to the side now with her dad. And then the Dalai Lama just goes up to the microphone and starts as if nothing special had happened and begins his lecture. You ever been surprised by an act of profound grace? Ever been surprised by an act of pure kindness? There was grace and kindness through that simple gesture of being attentive to a child that others were overlooking. The ability of this holy man to focus on the need that was right in front of him. The Dalai Lama, the prophet Isaiah, the writer of the Gospel of Matthew, want us to know that life is bigger than we can possibly imagine. Can't you see it, says Isaiah? Can't you see beyond the uncertainty and the darkness of this present moment? In this uncertainty of our time as a nation and as a world with so much violence, so much uncertainty, can't you see it, says Isaiah, what is already about to be brought before your attention? New life is percolating before you. Light is beginning to dawn. The heaviness is beginning to lift. And all you need to do is follow that promise. Hold on to that hope. Be guided by that star. And to see that is, as with the Dalai Lama, that there is beauty all around us. Light breaking forth. And you and I can be expressions of that light and of that hope and of that love in the simple kindnesses that we offer to each other, in the good we do in the wider world. In the first letter of John, we hear these words. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. Can't you see it, says Isaiah? Can't you see the power of God's love at work in your midst? Hold on to this promise, says Isaiah. Hold on to this promise, says Matthew. And be the source of kindness and hope. This is the good news. Thanks be to God. The light has come on this Epiphany. And may God's people say, Amen.